One of the things you can do to save on interest cost is taking advantage of 0% balance transfer offers. However, this process is full of traps set up by credit card companies to make sure you do pay interest and fees. This video is about how to win the 0% balance transfer offer. We're going to talk about general rules, eligibility, accounting for transfer and annual fees, application of payments, and other things to be aware of. So I usually structure those videos in a logical manner, but here I gotta give a little bit of a prologue, a side story to explain why you always have to start with a brand new credit card. So back in the day, I had my primary credit card. It was the best redemption rate, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, please check out this video or in the links below. So I got a special from the card in the mail. It was like 4 or 5 checks, which I could write to any organization or give it to anybody, and it will be 0% for 12 months on my credit card balance. And there was 2% balance transfer fee. At that time, I had a car loan of around $8,000 at 4% APR. I calculated the balance transfer fee of 2% and figured out that I would actually save on interest costs, so I wrote the check to my loan company and all of that balance got transferred to my primary credit card. And this is really when my mistake started, because I continued to use my card for daily purchases. So when I received the credit card statement, I saw 2 balances. One was for $8,000 at 0% APR, and another for $2,000 from my daily purchases with, I think it was 25% APR. So when I was doing my credit card payment, I paid $2,000, assuming that credit card will apply it to the highest APR balance first. And I did the payment in full for $2,000, and then when I got my next statement, to my surprise, my 0% balance went down by $2,000, and my high APR balance just kept accumulating interest at 25% compounded daily. So of course I called the credit card company and said, like, well, I had no option to choose where my payment goes, and that pretty much means I can't do daily purchases if you keep reducing my 0% balance, because the whole point was that I have it for 12 months. And they told me that that's how it works. So when you do the balance transfer, you can't actually use the card for daily purchases. So this story leads me to 2 things. First of all, you got to be aware of payment applications, which we'll talk a little bit further down the list. And the rule number 1 is you can't do it with your primary credit card if you want to continue using it. So whenever you do it, you got to start with a brand new credit card. So this leads me to the general rules. And number 1 is you have to start with a brand new credit card. Number 2 is common sense. You have to pay off the balance before the promotional rate expires. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with a regular credit card interest, which can be 20 to 25% APR. Number 3 is effect on your credit history. Every time you apply for a credit card, the issuer will do what's called a hard pull on your credit history report, and your score is going to go down. The next rule is that all of the credit cards have their special eligibility rules to kind of prevent people like you and I trying to win the credit card game. You can't really do it often, and coupled with a hard pull on your credit history, you can only do it once in 18 to 24 months really to make it effective. So when you do it, you gotta make sure you choose the card with the longest promotional interest. And the last rule is 0% balance doesn't mean you don't have to make any payments. You still have to make at least the minimum payment. So you gotta account for that and make sure you do that minimum payment. So let's move to a concrete example and evaluate a Wells Fargo Platinum card that right now offers 0% for 18 months, which I think is the longest in the market from what I've seen. So we talked about checking eligibility, And of course, you can assume that you'd have to have a high credit score to qualify for those promotional offers. But on top of that, credit cards have their own little special rules to prevent people from really using the system to their benefit. So if you look at this card, you will see that if you opened an account with Wells Fargo within last 15 months, you're not going to qualify for the promotional offer. And if you open a credit card with Wells Fargo in the last 6 months, they're probably not going to give you a credit card at all. And all other credit cards have the same type of rules to prevent people from really benefiting from the system. The most famous one being Chase 524, which means if you open 5 credit accounts in the last 24 months, they're not going to issue any credit cards. If you want to learn about all of those different rules, feel free to download our credit card guide, How to Win the Game. The link is below in the description. The next thing you got to take into account is balance transfer fees and sometimes annual fee. So even though the APR is 0%, to transfer the balance, credit card is asking you for a fee. In this case of Wells Fargo, it's 3% if you do the balance transfer within 3 months and 5% if you do the balance transfer after the 3 months. On top of that, most of the premium cards will carry an annual fee, so you need to take both the new annual fee for that extra new credit card and balance transfer fee to see what your actual savings on interest costs are. And I typically use calculators. We have one on our website, and there's a link again below in the description to this calculator, so you can quickly add all of your credit cards and see what the savings are with a 0% balance transfer offer. The next thing you want to check is what a 0% APR applies to. Does it apply only to balance transfer or purchases as well? You don't want to assume that 0% applies to purchases and run into the same story that I had where you think you're paying 0% while you're actually paying 26%. Also, in some cards, the 0% APR will apply to purchases, but the promotional period will be way shorter than the balance transfer. So you really got to be aware and read all of the terms and conditions. Which leads me back to application of payments. You want to be really clear on how credit card applies your payments. Continuing with our Wells Fargo example and reading the terms of conditions, you can see that the minimum payment will apply to lowest APR, which means if you had a transaction with high APR, that will just continue accumulating interest while your 0% balance goes down. And if you make a payment in excess of minimum payment, it will generally apply to high APR, which there is actually a recent law in the US that forces credit card companies to do it. But the word general is very vague and unclear. So the safest thing you can do is, if you do take advantage of that 0% balance transfer, is just to stick with it. Don't use that credit card for anything else. In this case, the card also offers purchases for 18 months at 0%, so you can be safe here, but again, make sure that whatever you evaluate, that this is the case for that credit card. So last few things to be aware of is you have to make the minimum payment. Don't assume that 0% means no payments. You also got to be very clear on when the promotional rate ends, because sometimes it doesn't coincide with the credit card billing cycle. So you don't want to be hit with that 26% interest for 2 or 3 weeks before you make the credit card payment. The safest thing is to figure it out, put in your calendar a few days ahead of time to make sure that you completely cover the balance and don't get hit with that 26%. The last item on the list, the credit cards don't really want you to be paying that 0% APR, so they included few penalty rules for what you can do to forfeit that offer, and sometimes it's just one missed payment or a late minimum payment. So you gotta make sure you know the rules, you abide by the rules. Otherwise, you might have thought you have 18 months with 0% and boom, that offer is gone and you're stuck with 26%. So in summary, it's definitely possible to win the 0% balance transfer offer, but you can't do it often. You gotta make sure you know your terms and conditions. and you pay off the balance before the promo ends. Thank you for watching.